Drive safe. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. Keep right, and then turn right. Turn right. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. Get ready to turn right. Turn right. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. Get ready to turn right. Turn right. Ready to roll. Never mind. I'll find a new route. Go straight on. Get ready to turn right. Turn right. Keep left. straight on. Go straight on. Go straight on.
place.
Olympic Games, welcome back to Greece.
Reviewing past opening ceremonies in other cities, Slimani says the group appreciated Athens' humility and London's humor. She says France will talk about freedom, equality, and fraternity, universal values embodied by the French Revolution.
But at the same time, we didn't want France to appear arrogant and to appear like we are looking at the rest of the world with our big values. We needed also to try to make fun of ourselves and have a certain derision.
Slimani says they want Parisians, tourists, and TV viewers around the globe to discover the ceremony together, like opening a present. There are rumors that Celine Dion may take part, and French-Malian singer Aya
Go straight
Nakamura,
on.
the best-selling French artist on the planet. But an unprecedented ceremony requires unprecedented security, says criminologist Alain Bauer. He says he tried to talk President Macron and Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo out of it.
It's quasi impossible. First, it's open air, and you have the drone issue, which is new. Second, it's very long because it's long in miles and it's long in time. You don't run on the river, you go very slowly.
Some 15,000 French soldiers are also helping secure the city Friday. Colonel Remy Chabot's engineering regiment is in charge of the zone where the athletes and performers board the boats.
On est face en fait à un défi de sécurité parce qu'on agit sur plusieurs.
We are facing a huge security challenge, he says, from the air with drones or possible shooters on rooftops, all the usual threats on the ground, and also threats on the river like a boat or jet ski incursion or even from under the water, which is why we're using sonar. Chabot says the challenge is to integrate all the different security methods. Paris has been blocked off and carved up with metal barricades and police checkpoints. The banks of the Seine are almost impenetrable, but I managed to get through with my press badge. I'm down on the Seine River 2 days before the Olympic ceremony, and it's absolutely an incredible scene. The grandstands are up on the riverbanks, the giant screens are up, and they're practicing for the big night. Cyclists are doing stunts on skateboard ramps installed on 3 floating platforms decorated like gardens. Helicopters hover overhead. On a different night this week, we catch a glimpse of another practice session along the Seine. Lithe dancers moving in unison on a Paris rooftop, accompanied by trumpeters on another. Just a part of the Olympic present to be unwrapped Friday along the River Seine. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
It is the end of an era at Southwest Airlines. Customers will no longer be able to choose any open seat when they board the plane. That's something Southwest has been known for since its founding more than 50 years ago. But the airline announced today that it is changing course, as NPR's Joel Rose reports.
When Southwest first lifted off in the 1970s, its unconventional boarding process was part of the pitch.
At Southwest Airlines, we want our passengers to spend their time in the air, not on the ground.
That's founder Herb Kelleher, TV commercial in the 70s.
Our planes pull into the jetways, board passengers, and pull out again in 10 minutes or less. The way we look at it, the quicker you're in the air, the quicker you get where you're going.
5 decades later, most Southwest passengers still line up by group at the gate, choose their own seats from whatever is open on the plane, though the turnaround generally takes a lot more than 10 minutes. But now Southwest Airlines says it plans to use assigned seats like other airlines. It's also planning to sell premium seats with extra legroom and to add overnight red-eye flights for the first time starting in February.
This is what our customers want.
That's current CEO Bob Jordan in an interview today with CNBC.
80% of customers that fly Southwest today want an assigned seat. 86% of customers that don't fly Southwest want an assigned seat. And when a customer defects from Southwest to another competitor, it's the #1 reason. So it's the right thing at the right time.
Do Southwest's customers
Finding
agree?
a new
We asked
route.
passengers in Dallas, where the airline is based, how they feel about the end of open seating.
I kind of like being able to select my own seat.
Cherie Eddington says she's a longtime Southwest customer.
It is a surprise because I feel like that's a part of their brand. continue to fly free, I'll be all right.
But Jan DeLue of Columbus, Ohio, says she prefers assigned seats.
I'm always anxious, and that's one last piece of the trip. I don't know where I'm going to sit. So I always like, having a seat assignment.
The news about open seating came the same day that Southwest announced a sharp drop in second quarter profits. The airline is also under pressure from an activist investor, hedge fund Elliott Investment Management, which argues Southwest is underperforming. But CEO Bob Jordan says that's not why this change is happening.
I know there are going to be customers who say, I want to stay with open seating. It's a minority. I'm convinced we can win them over.
Southwest says it will reveal more details about its assigned seating plan, including when it will take effect, at an investor event in September. Joel Rose, NPR News, Washington.
From NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from Amazon Music. Prime members get access to a catalog of podcasts ad-free, including NPR shows Up First and News Now. Available by downloading the Amazon Music app or visiting amazon.com/ad-free. From Easy Cater, committed to helping companies from nonprofits to the Fortune 500 find restaurants that cater meetings and events. With online ordering and 24/7 live support. Learn more at easycater.com. From Progressive, Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at progressivecommercial.com. And from the Doris Duke Foundation.
This is News 88.7. I'm Brenda Valdivia. 69 northbound at FM 1485 at Montgomery County is still dealing with a heavy truck accident affecting all main lanes. There's a flood watch in effect until tomorrow afternoon at 4 as thunderstorms are still sticking around for the next few days. You can expect to see a low in the mid-70s tonight with a 60% chance of showers and thunderstorms, increasing to 80% tomorrow, highs in the mid-80s. It's currently 76 degrees. With some fog, rain, and mist here at the University of Houston.
First, the Public Utility Commission took aim Thursday. Next, a special Texas Senate committee will grill CenterPoint Energy executives about the utility's much-criticized response to Hurricane Beryl. I'm Craig Cohen. We'll preview Monday's hearing on the next Houston Matters.
That's tomorrow morning at 9, right after Morning Edition here on News 88.7. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston at 6 o'clock.
This allegiance to the sanctity of marriage and a certain kind of marriage is central to his politics and his morality.
Supporters of Vice President Kamala Harris are taking issue with J.D. Vance's description of her as a childless cat lady.
For Thursday, July 25th, it's All Things Considered from NPR News. And I'm Ari Shapiro. President Biden has spent half a century in Delaware's political scene. How are people there reacting to his decision not to run for re-election?
Anybody who lives in the state of Delaware, even if they just went and voted for him, has some sense of pride in that.
Plus, we talk science with the hosts of NPR's Shortwave podcast, Rogue Waves, Oxygen Near the Ocean Floor, and chimps that communicate with gestures.
They seem to have this back and forth in a face-to-face communicative setup that kind of resembles human conversations.
Those stories and more after these headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Spear. Vice President Kamala Harris met today at the White House with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The meeting between the likely Democratic presidential nominee coming after the Israeli leader met earlier with President Joe Biden. Harris emerged from the meeting saying she has an unwavering commitment to the state of Israel, but also pretty quickly turned to the ongoing loss of life in Gaza due to Israel's war with Hamas.
I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there.
Harris echoed President Biden's call for a swift ceasefire and an end of fighting. White House officials continue to say those negotiations are in the closing stages, though they also say there's still issues to be resolved. Vice President Harris, meanwhile, expressed her strong support for unions today at a campaign stop in Houston. Harris was addressing a gathering of the American Federation of Teachers, the first union to endorse her run for president. NPR's Andrea Shue.
Harris sounded much like President Biden in her speech, reminding Americans that they have unions to thank for the 8-hour workday, paid sick leave and family leave and vacation time. And she vowed to keep pushing on the PRO Act, a bill that's been stalled in Congress that would make it easier for workers to unionize.
President Joe Biden and I promised to sign the PRO Act into law, and I promise you I will keep that promise.
Harris has been flooded this week with endorsements from labor groups who warn that a second Trump term would roll back gains that unions and workers have made under a labor-friendly administration. Andrea Shue, NPR News.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is promising to more aggressively crack down on homeless encampments on public property. Follows a recent Supreme Court decision that expanded government's authority to fine and arrest people living on the streets. Member station KQED, Aditi Bundalumudi has more.
California is home to a third of the country's homeless population. Following the Supreme Court's decision, Governor Newsom is now directing state agencies to craft policies to clear encampments and work with local governments.
We have now no excuse with the Supreme Court decision. These executive orders about getting a sense of urgency that's required of local government to do their job.
Homeless advocates blasted this decision and say it will only cause more harm. They point to research showing that fewer than a quarter of people who are forced from encampments actually end up in permanent housing. For NPR News, I'm Aditi Bandlamudi.
Stocks partially bounced back some from yesterday's massive sell-off that caused the worst losses for the U.S. financial markets since 2022. The Dow rose 81 points. The S&P, though, fell 27 points. The Nasdaq dropped 160 points. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gail DeLauder. A Harris County criminal court judge has had all her cases reassigned after a court reporter filed a complaint against her. News 88.7's Lucille Vasquez says it comes after the judge was hit with drunk driving charges.
The complaint against Judge Kelly Johnson was reportedly filed by Gail Rowland, a court reporter who's worked with Johnson for years. Rowland told the Houston Chronicle that she filed the complaint in response to a hostile work environment. Now Johnson's cases have been reassigned to other judges, and it's unclear how long this will last. However, she remains the elected official over the 178th District Court. This comes after Johnson was hit with a DWI last month. Her attorney claims she was not intoxicated and instead was suffering from a brief medical episode. I'm Lucio Vasquez, News 88.7.
The Texas General Land Office and the Coast Guard are assessing a leak from an inactive oil platform in the Gulf. They say the leak has created an oil sheen. The Galveston Bay Foundation says any impacts locally should be minimal because of how far away it is. The state says it's working to secure that leak. Your trip to a Houston park could look a lot different after Hurricane Beryl. That's after some parks flooded while others lost dozens of trees. News 88.7's Pili Saravia reports.
Freddie Torres says he went on a run in Memorial Park the day of Hurricane Beryl.
This particular storm, I know there was a few trees down around the trail, so you actually had to get on the street or kind of jump over the tree.
2 weeks after the hurricane, some Memorial Park trails have been cleared while others are still closed, along with the tennis center.
I did see the tree people picking up, I guess, all the debris and all the branches that had put to the side.
Buffalo Bayou Park went almost completely underwater because of Beryl. Some areas have reopened, but other places, including the dog park, will stay closed for weeks. I'm Pili Saravia, News 88.7.
A flood watch has been extended until 4 tomorrow afternoon. 60% chance of rain tonight. Overnight low around 73. I'm Gail DeLauder, News 88.7.
Keep
Support for NPR comes from Amazon Business. From small business to big enterprise and everything in between, Amazon Business works to help simplify the supplies buying process. Learn more about smart business buying at amazonbusiness.com. This is NPR.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Ari Shapiro in Washington.
And I'm Elsa Chang in Culver City, California. Childless cat ladies. That's how J.D. Vance, the Republican vice presidential nominee, once described leadership on the progressive left.
we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Now, we should note here that the, quote, basic fact that Vance describes is actually not factual. Harris does have stepchildren, and Pete Buttigieg has adopted children. This clip is from an interview he did in 2021 with Tucker Carlson. Now, for years, Vance has promoted policies that incentivize families to have children and penalize those who do not. He's called a drop in birth rates in America a, quote, civilizational crisis. He's even suggested that people with children should get more votes in elections than people who do not have children. For more, we're joined now by Jessica Winter of The New Yorker, who just wrote a piece about Vance's politics on families and children. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to start by looking at J.D. Vance's policies on this front because, he's only been a senator for a couple years, and he's already introduced legislation that gives us some glimpse into his family politics. Tell us about the policy positions he's proposed.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that his policy positions are somewhat friendlier to working families than that of your average conservative establishment Republican. I think a really good example of this is that he's voiced support for Josh Hawley's child tax credit proposal from a few years back. He pointed at Hawley's proposal as something that, quote unquote, normal Americans want, rather than, quote unquote, shunting their kids into crap daycare. But what's interesting about that proposal was that Hawley explicitly positioned it as having a marriage bonus, that married couples at the same income threshold as single parents would receive what he called a 100% marriage bonus. And I think that's very much in keeping with J.D. Vance's focus on the ideal family as being one where mom is at home with the kids, dad is at work, and they're getting by on a single income. And I think that squares with Hawley's as well. A kind of small bore proposal that Vance introduced that I think is also telling in its way is that he wanted to close a loophole in the FMLA.
The Family Medical Leave Act.
That's right. Where at times mothers who take maternity leave but then ultimately decide not to return to work, sometimes they're on the hook for premiums that their employers have paid into healthcare plans. And he wanted to eliminate that. But again, he explicitly positioned it for mothers who choose to stay at home and prioritize their children. And he did say mothers, he didn't say parents. So again, I think that was very much in line with this larger ideological project that I think that he has regarding the family.
I mean, despite some of Vance's policies appearing to be family-friendly, a very specific part of his politics here seems to be in opposition to childcare, right? Like, can you explain the way childcare fits into the picture here?
Right. When he talked about daycare being crap, he was making a lot of assumptions about daycare workers, the daycare industry, and also parents who might choose to enroll their kids in daycare. He doesn't see the daycare industry as a job creator or something that could boost communities that might need good jobs and good industries. He does not see daycare workers who are typically underpaid. He doesn't see them as possible constituents whom he can help. And I think most importantly, he does not see why a woman, a working mother, might want to work outside of the home just for her own fulfillment.
Well, I also want to talk about the voice that Vance wants to give people with children in a democracy. Like, I want to play you a piece of tape. This is Vance in 2021 speaking to a political conference in Virginia.
Let's give votes to all children in this country, but let's give control over those votes to the parents of those children. When you go to the polls in this country as a parent, you should have more power. You should have more of an ability to speak your voice in our democratic republic than people who don't have kids.
People with children should get more votes. Is this a view that's shared by others in Vance's political ecosystem? And do you think he's suggesting this as a real policy, or is he just trying to stir the pot there?
I mean, I think it's possibly a view that's shared but not voiced. I think what it does is, again, show his priorities, show his hand. in terms of what's important to him and what kind of sociocultural family ideal he wants to hold up. However not based in reality it might be, the fact that he's voicing it, the fact that he's saying that some people are more important than others, their vote is more valuable than other people, I mean, that's startling unto itself.
You write in your piece about Vance's own family history, which he wrote extensively about in his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. We can't, obviously get inside his brain to know exactly how his own personal experience impacts his politics on families and children, but what insight did you get from his family story that might be relevant here?
Vance has spoken a lot in his memoir, and also notably in a TED Talk that he did around the time of the memoir, which is a really interesting artifact, I think, about how he could have been a statistic, that he could have fallen prey to kind of generational trauma in his family. His mother struggled with drugs. She cycled through many, many boyfriends and husbands who added a great deal of volatility to an already volatile household while Vance was growing up. And the reason, he says, that he beat the odds was in great part because of his grandparents. He had these wonderful grandparents who were so supporting and encouraging of him and who offered him a refuge from the chaos of his mother's household. And he's very frank about his grandparents' flaws. His grandfather struggled with alcoholism for a long time. They were violent toward each other. And I think a crucial difference that he draws between his grandparents and his mother is that they stayed married. He really praises and extols the virtues of the fact that his grandparents, no matter how bad, how violent, how affected by alcohol their marriage was, that they stuck it out. And I think there's ample evidence in everything that he's said and everything that he's written that this allegiance to the sanctity of marriage and a certain kind of marriage is really central to his politics and his morality.
Jessica Winter is an editor at The New Yorker who writes about families and education. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Joe Biden has been part of Delaware politics for more than 5 decades. He started out as a county councilman when he was 28 years old. He's currently the oldest president in U.S. history, and his announcement that he won't run for re-election likely marks the close of one of the country's longest political careers. Rachel Swicky with Delaware Public Media reports on how the first state is reacting to the news.
So I decided the best way forward
Go straight on.
Pass the torch to a new generation.
President Joe Biden's decision to step away from his re-election campaign ends a long run in elected office that had humble beginnings.
Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton,
let's
Pennsylvania,
find a new
Claremont,
route.
Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am.
Back home in Delaware, 29-year-old Jack Bradley from Wilmington says he was holding out hope Biden would stay in the race, and he's disappointed in how the campaign ended.
Especially because this year specifically, he has had a lot of really strong moments, thinking all the way back to the State of the Union, which seems like years ago now.
Wilmington resident Eileen Crawford says she thinks Biden made the right decision, and she'll still vote for the Democratic candidate.
At his age, yes, I think he's done his job well. And he'll do the next 5 months really well, finish it out, and pass the torch.
Jack Cunningham was born and raised in northern Delaware and served as Newcastle County Chief of Police. He says he's voted for Biden in every election since he's been old enough to cast a ballot.
Anybody who lives in the state of Delaware, even if they just went and voted for him, has some sense of pride in that.
Cunningham remembers how Biden showed up when he received an award as a patrolman. He says the president always showed support for those close to home, and he put the first state on the national stage.
I don't know if Delaware has affected Joe Biden as much as Joe Biden's affected Delaware. Before Joe Biden was vice president, I don't think half the people in the United States could show you where Delaware was on the map.
Delaware's senior Democratic Senator Tom Carper says he first heard about Biden while he was serving in Vietnam, when the young, unknown local councilman defeated a 2-term incumbent.
I read about an election in Delaware where a 29-year-old whippersnapper, a politician, knocked off an icon in order to become a United States Senator, too young to serve. And I thought, boy, that is amazing. This guy must really be something.
He credits Biden with creating the Delaware Way, a political culture that relied on personal relationships instead of partisanship, and that some criticize for creating a club-like atmosphere.
We work across the aisle, we work together, we share credit. That's the Delaware Way. And he has taken that, and I hope I have as well, to a new level here in our nation's capital.
Author Dan Shortridge has lived in Delaware for most of his life and says he can't remember a time without Joe Biden around.
He was always Joe. He was always there. I don't remember a time without him. Born in 1979. You know, he was just always there. He was always a popular speaker.
For Jack Cunningham, Biden's exit is an opportunity to reflect on his storied political career. He says not seeing Biden on the ballot this election day will mark the end of an era for the state.
I don't know if his parents told him this, but mine did. Leave things better than you found them. And he did.
For NPR News, I'm Rachel Sawicki in Newark, Delaware.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
Hey, I'm Kai Wright. Join me every weekend for Notes from America here on News 88.7. Each week, we are seeking real insight on the many tough questions that Americans are asking ourselves right now. And we're creating connection in a divided world. And you're invited. So gather with us, take part in live, intimate conversations, and learn from one another. Notes from America, Sundays at 5 p.m. on News 88.7.
Some things in life are difficult, but making a difference in our community should be. Why not take your old or unused vehicle and donate it to Houston Public Media? Take something you're not using and turn it into something you can't get enough of. We'll handle the paperwork, provide free contactless pickup of your car, and issue you a tax receipt. If it's not in the best condition, don't worry about it. We'll take it. Call 877-252-0436 or donate online at HoustonPublicMedia.org/vehicles.
PBS NewsHour.
Now more than ever, you need news you can trust.
PBS NewsHour.
Unbiased, in-depth news that delivers substance over sensationalism.
PBS NewsHour.
Cutting through the noise with news that matters. World-class journalism that brings unrivaled national and global perspective home to you.
PBS NewsHour.
Elections, conflict, climate. Trust a news source that provides fair, thoughtful coverage of the events that impact our lives.
PBS NewsHour. Weeknights at 6 on Houston Public Media TV 8.
Support comes from attorney mediator Ron Bankston, providing in-person, video conference, and hybrid mediation and arbitration services. More at ronbankston.com. And the Gilbert and Sullivan Society of Houston, presenting the comic opera Redagore, a story of curses, ghosts, and bridesmaids, through July 28th at the Cullen Performance Hall. Tickets at gilbertandsullivan.org. You're listening to News 88.7. I'm Brenda Valdivia. There's a flood watch in effect until tomorrow. It's currently 76 degrees with some fog, rain, and mist here at the University of Houston.
PR comes from this station and from Bank of America, offering access to resources and digital tools designed to help local to global companies make moves for their businesses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/banking for business. From Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Elsa Chang. It's time now for our regular Science News Roundup with our friends at NPR's Shortwave podcast, Regina Barber and Emily Kwong. Hi to both of you.
Hey.
Hi. Hi. Okay, so how this works, I love that we explain this all the time, is you have brought us 3 science stories that caught your attention this week. What are they?
All right, drum roll. So we have for you, very nice, we have for you what chimpanzee gestures reveal about communication, how oxygen is being created at the bottom of the ocean, and how a computer program may warn people before a huge rogue wave hits.
I love it. Okay, I definitely want to start with the chimps, because if they gesticulate, I want to know if they talk with their hands more than I do.
Okay, yeah, chimps definitely do. I mean, they don't have full-blown language like we do, so gestures are really important for communication. Can I show you a clip of that?
Please.
Okay, so these are 2 chimpanzees in a tree. They just had some conflict. And you can see that one chimp reaches for the other chimp's hand, like, I'm sorry. And after a pause, the other chimp gently taps their hand back.
It looks so tender. I'm watching this like they're really making up. Is that happening?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. So, like, gestural exchanges like this are the topic of a recent paper in the journal Current Biology. Gal Badihi is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland and the lead author of this paper.
And my part was the East African chimpanzees.
Sweeping an enormous data set, Gal looked at exchanges among 5 wild chimpanzee populations. Usually these exchanges had like 2 parts, hand reach, hand tap back, but sometimes these exchanges had up to 7 parts, which was super exciting to see.
Because they seemed to have this back and forth in a face-to-face communicative setup that kind of resembles human conversations a little bit more.
That's so cool. And
Go
they're
straight
sure
on.
that it has nothing to do with the sounds that they're uttering towards each other. It's just the gestures that's the language?
Well, they are making
Go
sounds,
straight
but
on.
the gestures is what they were really paying attention to because of the pacing of the gestures. Like the back and forth was really similar to human conversation. The pause between a gesture and a gestural response averaged to about 120 milliseconds. It's really fast.
Okay, well, how close is that to human response?
Yeah, conversational turns in humans average to about 200 milliseconds across language.
No way.
Again, all very rapid fire, all very fast.
I had no idea there was a range. Anyway, if chimps are supposed to be like one of our closest living relatives, right? Like, does this reveal anything about the evolution of how humans communicate?
It presents an intriguing possibility, yeah, that this kind of back and forth communication may have evolved before humans split off from great apes. We don't know for sure, but several primatologists I spoke to who were not a part of the study all felt this was an important contribution to understanding how turn-taking and communication dynamics evolved. No language required.
That is so fascinating. Okay, now we're gonna take a sharp turn and move to oxygen on the seafloor. I take it that that is a weird thing, right? Otherwise we would not be talking about it.
Yeah, so most of Earth's oxygen is created through photosynthesis. That's when, plants take in light, water, and carbon dioxide, and then they make like sugar and oxygen.
But for over a decade, scientists were aware of traces of oxygen at the bottom of the ocean, like 3 miles down where there's no light, no photosynthesis. So where did this oxygen come from? And a new study in the journal Nature Geoscience may have an answer. It shows that oxygen produced without light, called dark oxygen, could be coming from bits of metal in the deep ocean.
Wait, metal?
And then continue
what kind
straight
of
on.
metal is in the deep sea? Like, how did it get all the way down there?
It's these clumps of metals like
Go straight
nickel,
on.
manganese, cobalt, iron that form these nodules on the seafloor. And they grow on top of stuff that falls to the bottom like shark teeth.
Yeah, I talked to physical chemist Franz Geiger about this, and he's one of the paper's co-authors, and he studied these clumps of metal in the lab. He specified it's not a rock, and these nodules grow 1 millimeter per million years. And these are a few centimeters big, so these clumps of metal accumulated over millions and millions of years.
Think of like a really, really slow game of Tetris.
Okay, so these clumps of metal grow very, very slowly. They glom together. And how are they producing oxygen? Like, I thought that is what plants do.
Right, so preliminary experiments suggest it's partly through electrolysis of seawater. So electric current in the middle chunk splits ocean water, H2O, into hydrogen and oxygen, but the sensors they used only detect oxygen, so they need more data before they can be like, sure, this is happening.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it was surprising, actually, to the researchers, but there was another surprise that happened along the way. Franz almost lost the nodules.
Oh, no.
He got an email from Customs about the package the nodules were in, and they said that soil imports aren't allowed, and they told him
The package will be destroyed. And I was like, what? I was in a faculty meeting when that happened.
Oh, dang, Customs!
Yeah, well, okay, so he then, scoured the shipping rules and found that soil of oceanic origins can be imported without any issues, and this saved the nodulus samples.
Soil of oceanic origin loophole!
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Well, let's just keep with
your legal background is coming through.
I want to stay in the ocean. Our final story is about waves gone rogue. What the heck, guys?
Yeah, so rogue waves are these abnormally large waves that seem to come out of nowhere and they endanger ships at sea. Our colleague Nell Greenfield-Boyce reported that advances in AI could someday help predict them.
Huh. Okay, so when you say abnormally large waves, like Like, how big are we talking?
For a wave to be rogue, it has to be over twice the size of the surrounding waves at a given time. Okay. So it depends on the size of the waves in the area. For centuries, scientists thought these waves were a sailing myth until a scientific instrument managed to record one that measured 84 feet.
Yeah, and rogue waves are dangerous. They can damage ships, infrastructure, cause power failures, and really hurt people. A cruise ship passenger died, and others were injured when a freak wave hit the Viking Polaris in 2022.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way of predicting them, but a new study suggests that actually it may be possible to use information from floating buoys to give people some advance warning. So, researchers have developed a computer system that correctly predicted 73% of these rogue waves 5 minutes before they occurred, which is valuable. It's like an earthquake warning, you know? With some time, oil rig workers or ship passengers can seek shelter, perform emergency shutdowns, or evacuate.
Yeah.
If people on the ocean had a little more time, that would help.
Wow. Well, how did these researchers figure out
Go
how
straight
to
on.
predict these waves?
Yeah, so a researcher with the University of Maryland, Bala Balachandran, and his colleagues trained a neural network using data from 172 buoys off the coast of the continental U.S. and the Pacific Islands.
All of that data helped train the computer system to recognize waves that occurred right before a rogue wave happened, and also to distinguish them from waves that weren't followed by a rogue wave.
The scientists say they still have to improve the system's accuracy, but this could be the start of a powerful tool that could even lead to better forecasting for other extreme events.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Also, what's pretty awesome are Regina Barber and Emily Kwong from NPR's science podcast Shortwave, where you can learn about new discoveries, everyday mysteries, and the science behind the headlines. Thank you, guys.
Right. Thanks,
Thank
Elsa.
you.
This is NPR News.
You're listening to News 887.
Hi, it's Jeremy Hobson, inviting you to join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. here on News 88.7 for The Middle. This weekly live national call-in talk show amplifies the voices of people in the middle, politically, geographically, or philosophically. The Middle is a nonpartisan and non-judgmental space where everyone can feel comfortable sharing their views and being part of the conversation. So join me for The Middle with Jeremy Hobson, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on News 88.7.
Matt Harrop here, your morning anchor on News 88.7. I've had the privilege of telling our city's most powerful stories on your drive to work or wherever you're off to start your day. Whether it's news our reporters have dug up, breaking news, a developing story, or necessary weather information, my goal every morning is to give you what you need to know. Houston Public Media is community funded. Your contributions enable us to deliver in-depth reporting on matters that impact our city, and we sincerely appreciate your support.
Marketplace is supported by Rubrik. When cyber attacks put businesses at risk, Rubrik provides the power to bounce back fast. More at Rubrik.com.
Not that I'm saying you should, but are all y'all ever gonna stop spending? From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Viking, exploring the world in comfort. Offering small ship, river, and ocean voyages, Viking designs travel experiences for curious travelers. Discover more at Viking.com. And by The Economist, devoted to providing independent journalism that makes sense of the news shaping the world. More at Economist.com or with The Economist app, newsletters, and podcasts. And by GitLab. More than 50% of the Fortune 100 rely on GitLab to develop, secure, and deploy software faster. More at GitLab.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Rizdal. It is Thursday today, the 25th of July. Good as always to have you along, everybody. Well, how about that? It turns out the American economy is growing just fine. Thank you very much. Our first whack at gross domestic product for the second quarter, that is April through June, came out this morning. Early guesses had been somewhere near 2% annualized, give or take a couple of tenths of percent. What we got was 2.8. That is double GDP growth in Q1. The big categories: vehicles, recreational goods, services, and furniture, as well as the essentials, healthcare and housing. And while, yes, direct investment and trade matter too, what really drove GDP last quarter were consumers. Consumers who are, according to the Fed, struggling to pay off their credit cards. Consumers who are, according to stores like Target and Walmart, focusing more on essentials. And consumers who are, according to both formal surveys and less formal dinner table talk, downright grumpy. And yet, they keep on spending. Marketplace's Kristen Schwab gets us going.
When you look at this GDP report from different distances, you see different things. Take the broad 50,000-foot view, and the economic picture and how consumers live in it looks blurry. Warren Klatchkin is an economist at Nationwide.
The economy continues to outperform expectations, and it's been really hard, frankly, to kind of get a firm handle on what's going on in the economy overall.
Comforting takeaway, I know. But Klatchkin says it's actually not so surprising that consumers aren't behaving the way we think they should. If we zoom way in from 50,000 feet to, say, 50, we'll see that
we're still, in many ways, in the aftermath of the pandemic, and at least from an economic data perspective, that's certainly the case.
if the value of your home or investments went up, you have a cushion. Meanwhile, if you're a low-income renter, inflation's probably still hitting you pretty hard. Camelia Cunin researches household finances at UNC at Chapel Hill.
There could be a story here of sort of two different types of American consumer. Those who have assets, who have net worth, and those who kind of have lived always sort of from month to month.
And Cunin says unless something dramatic happens in the labor market, homeowners may continue to spend.
And I think it's because people are like, okay, that's how much a car costs.
Consumers may be starting to accept that these prices are here to stay. Francesco Bianchi, an economist at Johns Hopkins, argues maybe when we look at this GDP report, we need to take a middle view, like from 500 feet.
Sometimes it's hard to see that if you just look quarter by quarter, but when you look at the trend, an average over a couple of quarters, you see that it's trending down.
That 2.8% increase, that's still less growth than right before the Fed started hiking interest rates, which is what the Fed is going for. I'm Kristen Schwab for Marketplace.
Wall Street today, well, nothing like yesterday, let's just say. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. Next week will be on the Federal Reserve and Chair Jay Powell. The central bank meets Tuesday and Wednesday to talk, yes, interest rates. The key rate that the Fed controls, it's called the federal funds rate, sits at just about 5.5% right now, up from, zero before the pandemic. Inflation, of course, has been the proximate cause, and we have talked about that and the monetary policy responses to it. Thing is, antiseptic discussions about data and policy totally miss the messy reality of the way things play out on the ground, as Marketplace's Stacey Vanek Smith reports.
It's early afternoon on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and Aaron McKenna's bakery is buzzing. The cozy little shop has pink walls, Christmas lights, knickknacks, and of course, desserts. A glass case with rows and rows of vibrant cupcakes, donuts, cookies.
Can I please get a lemon tea cake?
Alessandra Fabiani is a regular.
I have a severe nut allergy, and my sister can't do dairy, so we found a place that we could both safely eat at. And yeah, we've been loyal customers ever since.
Everything in this bakery is gluten-free and vegan and kosher. McKenna opened the bakery in 2005. And as it turned out, the food-allergic kosher vegans of New York were very excited that someone was finally letting them eat cake.
People were coming in droves, and then I got on Martha Stewart.
That TV spot was a very good thing for McKenna and had orders pouring in from all across the country. By 2019, McKenna had a multi-million-dollar business with stores in Los Angeles and Disney World. And she was ready to take things to the next level. She opened her biggest store ever in a wealthy Santa Monica neighborhood.
This location was going to be transformative for us. I knew the customer. I'm like, this is a slam dunk. So I took out this massive loan and we opened in July of 2019.
We all know what happened next.
just completely destroyed the business. I was trying to make that location work and using all my resources to keep it open. I said, I just can't do it anymore. I had to close it. I just was done.
What she wasn't done with? The loan. McKenna's original loan for the Santa Monica store was $800,000. That 5-year loan just reached maturity, and McKenna still needs to pay off about $330,000. But when she went to refinance, the interest rate on her loan was jacked up to 15%, which put all of her bakeries at risk.
I'm facing a dilemma of how to refinance my loan without bankrupting my company.
McKenna would have to pay $8,000 a month in interest and fees alone.
That was going to put me in a position where I wouldn't be able to make payroll.
McKenna is doing everything she can to work out a deal. But if she can't, the lender could foreclose on her business. What is it like to be looking at these horrible decisions after like
19 years? Yeah. I'm sorry. Sorry. Give me a second.
Keep right, and then keep right.
Yeah. It's like being fed to the vultures.
Yeah. Are other small business owners you know in similar positions?
Oh, yeah. I know a lot of neighboring businesses just shuttering because no one can keep up, really.
This year, small businesses are declaring bankruptcy in numbers not seen since 2010. Julia Pollack is chief economist with ZipRecruiter.
This is small businesses going to refinance, as one does, and suddenly getting quotes that would more than double their monthly payments.
But this is the Federal Reserve's plan. Raise interest rates, make loans more expensive so people borrow less and spend less, so companies sell less and cut their prices to try to boost sales. That is how prices fall. That is how inflation comes down.
So far, everyone's been saying, wow, it's been a huge miracle. We have cooled inflation without massive job losses, right? So the question is, will there be a point where we lose too many businesses and too many jobs?
Meanwhile, as Erin McKenna has been trying to find a way forward for her bakery, an exciting offer has come up. Disney wants to serve her desserts on its cruises.
Go straight on.
It is a game changer, but it requires a huge investment from McKenna. And right now, things are tight.
I have the opportunity at my feet, and yet I'm just being choked by these current circumstances.
In order to meet this moment, McKenna is pinching every penny she can at her bakeries. Everything from paring down her menu to ordering fewer cake boxes.
We're low on boxes because, we had to use the money to pay the loan this month, and then rent gets pushed back another week, and then you're paying late fees there.
McKenna is hopeful she will find a way forward. After all, she has successfully steered her business through 2 decades of economic ups and downs. And she's always found a way to keep the cupcakes coming. In New York, I'm Stacey Vanek Smith for Marketplace.
Changes coming to the way we buy and sell homes in this country. Traditionally, if you sell a house through a realtor, you pay a commission, something near 5%, give or take, that's split between your agent and the buyer's agent. And the way these things work, that commission gets factored into the sale price of the home in question. Starting next month, though, listings can no longer include an offer of compensation for the buyer's agent. Part of a settlement between the National Association of Realtors and a group of plaintiffs who claim that practice of bundling commissions led to inflated fees. Marketplace's Amy Scott has been looking into how much is actually going to change.
Let's say I want to buy a house in Denver, and I check out a listing on Redfin.
Safe and sound.
So I can see it's a townhome built in 2018. Oh, and it's offering a 2.5% buyer's agent fee.
That's the commission my agent would get if I buy that house.
So if you're a buyer agent, you have a real incentive to care about that number, because that's what you get paid.
problem with that, says Jordan Berry, a law professor at USC, is that when I'm looking for a house, my agent may be less inclined to show me ones that offer lower commissions. That's called commission-based steering, and Berry recently published a study suggesting it happens. Looking at thousands of listings on Redfin in more than 30 different markets.
We find that homes that offer below-market commissions, they tend to get less attention on Redfin. They get fewer page views. But more importantly, from a seller's perspective, those homes take longer to sell, and they're less likely to sell at all.
The researchers also found training materials from major brokerages coaching agents to warn sellers against offering lower commissions because they'd get fewer showings. The realtors' settlement aims to address those concerns in a few ways. Starting August 17th, listing agents will no longer be allowed to offer a buyer's agent fee on the MLS. That's the multiple listing service agents use to share information about properties for sale. Brad Twiss owns Neighbors Realty in Portland, Oregon.
So what that means is for both buyers and their agents, they will no longer know if or how much a seller is willing to contribute towards the cost of the buyer's agent representation.
So no incentive to steer buyers toward one listing or another. In another change, buyers who work with an agent will need to have a written agreement spelling out their agent's compensation before touring any properties. Twist says a seller can still agree to cover the buyer's agent's commission. They just can't advertise it on the MLS.
I'm starting to think that not a ton is going to change. I think that based on the conversations that I've had with buyers, they are very keen on us asking sellers to cover my compensation as part of their offer.
And he thinks many sellers will agree in order to attract more offers. Dorica Bonds with Plumtree Realty in Cincinnati, Ohio, says buyers have essentially been paying commissions all along. They're just rolled into the sale price. That allows buyers to cover those costs through their mortgage. The commissions are then paid out of the seller's proceeds.
So you think that the seller pays for it, but the money came from the buyer, and all of that was already in your price up front, so really the buyer paid for it.
Now, if sellers decide they don't want to cover both commissions, buyers will have to pay their own agents out of pocket. And some worry that creates another upfront cost that could hurt people already struggling to compete in an expensive market. Ted Tozer is a longtime mortgage industry executive now at the Urban Institute. He says buyers may be able to negotiate lower fees for fewer services, but some will likely decide to go it alone, leaving them at a potential disadvantage.
I'm just really fearful that we could have some really bad outcomes for some buyers, potentially, during this transitioning.
Tozer, along with pretty much everyone I talked to, says the good thing about these changes will be more transparency about commissions and more room for negotiation. I'm Amy Scott for Marketplace.
Turn right.
Coming up.
We have a lot of hikes that start at 6 p.m.
I'm an early morning guy myself. First, though, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 81 points today, 0.2%, landed at 39,935. NASDAQ down 160, about 0.9%.
Get ready.
Finished at 17,181. The S&P 500 gained back 27 points, 0.5%, 53.99. Right. Uber slowed 0.6% today. That's despite a favorable ruling this morning from the California Supreme Court that upheld a voter-approved initiative, law now actually, allowing ride-sharing companies to treat their drivers as contract workers rather than employees. It's a big deal. Lyft dipped 1.4% today. Southwest Airlines ascended 5.5% today after posting better than expected earnings in the second quarter. And oh, by the way, that open seating system gone. Bond prices rose. Yield on the 10-year T-note 4.24%, remarkably steady actually the past couple of weeks. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Numbers is supported by Odoo.com, your entire business on one platform. Marketplace is supported by Bitwarden, with a reminder that in the Olympics and in business, getting ahead of the competition is critical. Bitwarden Password Manager offers enterprises a range of authentication options for single sign-on. Learn more at bitwarden.com.
Go straight
and
on.
by Amazon Business, aiming to help save time by offering smart business buying solutions, so there's more time to focus on growing the business and less time doing the admin. More at amazonbusiness.com. And by Raymond James, a firm focused on transforming lives, businesses, and communities through tailored wealth management, banking, and capital markets solutions. Disclosures at raymondjames.com.
Life coming at you fast? Many times, there's not enough hours in the day to follow all of Houston's news. When you find yourself too busy to stay informed, we have 2 words for you. Hello, Houston. A daily newsletter delivered right to your inbox from Houston Public Media. Every morning, we bring you a quick recap of the previous day and a look ahead at the current day's news. Sign up today at houstonpublicmedia.org/Hello Houston.
Support comes from Broadway Bank's commercial banking team, since 1941, committed to helping businesses with their financial needs and growth. More information available at Broadway.bank/commercial. Broadway.bank/commercial. Member FDIC. And Comcast Business. From Main Street to Wall Street, Comcast Business provides business solutions, ranging from cybersecurity solutions to round-the-clock partnership. Powering possibilities. Restrictions apply.
Go straight
You're
on.
listening to News 88.7, your community, your NPR station. It's 6:50.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Rizdal. Expectations, squishy though they may be, actually play a big part in what happens in this economy. We've talked about it most recently, I think, with an eye on inflation. What consumers think is going to happen with prices can affect what does happen with prices. Today, the retirement expectations game. There's some research out from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, building on what happened in the labor market in the first half-ish of the pandemic, the Great Resignation, right? People leaving their jobs in the expectation they would get a better one, and for older workers in particular, leaving the workforce altogether. Now, the New York Fed says, American workers' expectations of how old they are going to be when they stop working full-time is down from the before times. Marketplace's Mitchell Hart has that.
The New York Fed's survey of consumer expectations asks respondents if they think they'll still be working full-time when they're 62 and 67. In the past 10 years, the percentage who expect to work past 62 has fallen by 10 points to around 46%. Expectations of working past 67 have also declined. Alicia Munell directs the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College.
And I hope you're not going to ask me why it occurred, because I have no idea.
But actually, she does have some educated guesses. First, a wealth effect. Pandemic benefits, followed by a soaring stock market and home prices, led more people to retire early voluntarily.
So they were feeling rich and they just didn't need to work any longer.
There's also been a rise in involuntary early retirement, people leaving jobs for health or safety reasons during the pandemic and being unable or unwilling to come back. In fact, says Munell, people often expect they'll keep working longer than they actually do.
They end up getting sort of moved out, or they have a health issue, or spouse has a health issue.
All these factors were behind Julie Michael's decision to retire about 5 years ago. She's now 61.
I was a public health policy analyst, and I ended up retiring early because of health reasons, and then went back to work part-time, and then decided to completely retire when the pandemic happened.
At that point, Michaels and her husband moved from the Bay Area to Portland, Oregon, to be closer to family. They just welcomed a new grandchild. Initially, Michaels didn't want to fully retire.
I do volunteer work, childhood grief work that I enjoy, but I thought when we moved here that I would find other part-time work, and that just didn't happen. Moving to a new city, I just didn't have the connections.
After Michaels stopped working, there was a period when no paychecks were coming in. Her husband, Doug Honnold, had also retired early from his job as an environmental litigator for Earth Justice. Honnold says they had to stretch their savings until full Social Security benefits kicked in.
Retiring early, there's no magic financial number that you have. I was religious about funding my 401k, but even with all of that, there were many months where we didn't know if we could make the mortgage payment.
And the couple's retirement savings were basically in good shape. Most Americans aren't.
Over 50% of people who approach retirement age don't have enough money to maintain their living standards.
Economist Teresa Ghilarducci at the New School says half of U.S. workers have no savings in a personal retirement account, like a 401k or IRA. Ghilarducci says folks who retired during the pandemic weren't necessarily ready.
Many older people who eventually retired passed through a period of unemployment, which revealed that much of their so-called retirement was involuntary.
And what if the New York Fed economists finding that more Americans now expect to retire early, by age 62?
Even though they know that they don't have enough money, they also know, especially after the pandemic, that the labor market often doesn't want older people, especially those without college educations. And older women seem to have a lot more difficulty than older men.
Meanwhile, retirement age can be a moving target. Alicia Munell at Boston College planned to retire when she was 65, but she's still running the Center for Retirement Research at 82.
Because it's fun. I mean, I like it. I care also. I want a good retirement system so people after a lifetime of work can retire with dignity.
And she says for most people, if they're able, working at least until age 67, when full Social Security benefits typically kick in, will make for a financially healthier retirement. I'm Mitchell Hartman for Marketplace.
Go straight on.
Schwab started us off today talking about how consumers continue to drive this economy. All the stuff we've been spending our money on that push GDP past expectations. Again, includes goods, of course, stuff. Also, though, services. So we thought today would be as good a time as ever to hear from one of our service-oriented small business regulars. Lisa Pena owns Urban Hikes Kansas City.
Turn left.
Summer started out really busy. If we consider summer starting in May, when it starts to get warmer here in Kansas City, May was really full of lots of urban hikes, as well as June. However, in July, we had, it's been really hot and we haven't had as many urban hikes. But that's been something that is usually the same every single year, that we have some hot months where people wait a little bit before rebooking their urban hikes. The way that we're managing the summer heat is we have put a lot of our hikes in the evenings. Often our hikes start in the mornings, but at this time in July and August, we have a lot of hikes that start at 6 p.m. And 6 p.m. still, it's warm outside in Kansas City. However, there is a lot of shade from the buildings, so we're able to walk on the sides of the street that are a lot shadier. And then we find that there's usually an evening breeze. That has really helped us so that nobody really gets that hot.
Go straight on.
When I first started my business, my focus was on locals. And now that tourism has really been growing in the last few years in Kansas City, I have been working to reach tourists more. I have a plan to talk to different hotels and talk to their concierges so that they can have Urban Hikes KC on their radar. So often people come to a hotel, they ask the staff, what can we do in Kansas City? And I really want them to be able to have Urban Hikes Kansas City on their radar so they can tell their guests.
Turn left.
One thing that I'm happy to reflect on is that in one of our busiest months, May, my husband and I were able to take a vacation to Denmark and Switzerland and still have a very busy month.
Go straight on.
Because of the excellent work of all of my guides and actually having a group of 8 different guides out giving hikes, we're able to take a vacation and still have a really good month income-wise.
Lisa Pena, Urban Hikes Kansas City is her company.
Go straight on. Keep right.
Marketplace is supported by Amazon Business, focused on offering smart business buying solutions, leading time to focus on growth. More at AmazonBusiness.com.
Turn right.
And by USB Technology, found in billions of devices. USB Implementers Forum reminds consumers that certified products display USB-IF logos. Get the whole story at enablingusb.org. And by Rubric. When cyber attacks put businesses at risk, Rubric provides the power to bounce back fast. More at Rubric.com.
This final note on the way out today, interest rate news from a perhaps unexpected quarter. The Bank of China doesn't usually get top billing among the world's central banks. You know that list as well as I do, right? The Fed, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan. But the Bank of China helps run the second biggest economy on the planet, so it is news when they unexpectedly cut one of their main rates, which they did today. There are some economic challenges over there, a really troubled property sector, slack demand. Things are kind of tricky. John Buckley, John Gordon, Noya Carr, Diantha Parker, Amanda Peter, and Stephanie Seek are the Marketplace editing staff. Amir Bibawi is the managing editor, and I'm Kai Risdall. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is APM.
This is News 88.7. I'm Brenda Valdivia. There is a flood watch in effect until tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. As those showers and thunderstorms keep moving through the city and state, you can expect them to stick around to at least a Monday, gradually dropping down by Monday at 30%. But until then, we're looking at showers and thunderstorms still being likely. Temperatures in the mid-70s tonight, also highs tomorrow in the mid-80s. You can expect those temperatures to also stay steady as the rains move through. It's currently 76 degrees with some rain, fog, and mist here at the University of Houston. Support comes from the Co-Housing Lifestyle, a home with community outside the door, connection, and sustainability inside the loop. 2024 Move-In Information Session registration at cohousinghouston.org. And Kamala Harris uses Houston's speech to pledge stronger labor protection and attacks Donald Trump. You can read about that and more on our website at houstonpublicmedia.org. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. I'm out for the night, but I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. I hope you have a great Thursday. It's now 7 o'clock.
Go straight on.
Given where they are in the polls right now, the Harris campaign has to get her out there. They have to get as much visibility on her from voters in the key states and get her in different TV markets in Pittsburgh, in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in Atlanta, and sometimes many of those places in the same day.
I'm Michael Barbaro. That's coming up on The Daily from the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager, designed to empower travelers who need access to secure logins from any device and any place. Available to download at bitwarden.com.
For everything you need to know about the most important stories of the day, you're listening to The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Spear. Vice President Kamala Harris goaded Donald Trump today about a possible debate. Trump and President Biden had agreed to a September face-off, but now the debate status is unclear. Here's Danielle Kurtzleben has more.
Talking to reporters, Harris accused Trump of trying to back out of the debate now that she's the likely Democratic presidential nominee.
He agreed to that previously. Now it appears he's backpedaling, but I'm ready. And I think the
voters deserve to see the split screen that exists in this race.
Biden and Trump had agreed to a September 10th debate. But speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Trump gave mixed messages. He said, quote, "I haven't agreed to anything," and complained about ABC News, the debate host. He has suggested he wants Fox instead. But he also said he, quote, absolutely would debate Harris.
And then continue straight on.
NPR News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with both President Biden and likely Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris at the White House today. Families of some of those still being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza expressing optimism about a possible ceasefire deal. There is growing pressure in Israel and the U.S. to find a way to end the war there. Jonathan Deckel-Chen's American son is being held by Hamas, and he says he's more hopeful.
There is more reason today than in any time since the last round of hostage releases that something can happen and that all sides, that there is a place now to complete this three-phase deal.
The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas would be tied to a U.S.-backed proposal calling for the release of hostages in Gaza over 3 phases. White House officials say the negotiations are in closing stages, though issues remain. NASA still does not know when a pair of astronauts could return to Earth in Boeing's Starliner. As NPR's Nell Greenfield-Boyce explains, the agency's working through tests done to assess glitches with the new spacecraft's thrusters.
Astronauts Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore have been on the space station since early June. Their test flight in Starliner was bedeviled by helium leaks and thruster troubles. So since then, they've been hanging out on the station, waiting for NASA to sort everything out and make sure it's safe to return. Officials say their ground tests have them thinking they now understand the problems. They plan to fire the docked spacecraft's thrusters this weekend to get some more data. They say they expect to have an undocking review meeting next week and could make a decision then about bringing the astronauts home. Nell Greenfield-Boyce, NPR News.
The U.S. economy expanded at a stronger rate during the second quarter than many analysts had expected in its first look at growth during the April through June quarter. Government says its broadest measure of economic growth expanded at a 2.8% annual rate. That's far faster than the 1.4% rate reported during the first 3 months of the year. A mixed close on Wall Street. The Dow up 81 points. The Nasdaq fell. You're listening to NPR. Southwest Airlines is changing course and now plans to begin assigning seats to passengers. NPR's Joel Rose reports the airline announced today it will drop its open seating model.
Southwest Airlines has used open seating since its founding more than 50 years ago, with passengers lining up and choosing their own seats. But the airline says customer preferences have, quote, evolved. Southwest now plans to use assigned seats like other airlines. It's also adding premium seats and overnight red-eye flights. The airline says the changes are designed to meet customer expectations, but they're also intended to bring in more revenue.
And then continue
Changes
straight
come
on.
as Southwest announced a sharp drop in second quarter profits. The airline is also under pressure from an activist investor that argues Southwest is underperforming. Red-eye flights start next February. No word yet on when the seating changes take effect. Joel Rose, NPR News.
Some rough roads in terms of earnings for a couple of major automakers. Ford shares tumbled today after the company's second quarter profits fell well short of expectations. Ford says it posted an adjusted profit of 47 cents a share, well below industry estimates. Recall costs for Ford totaled $2.3 billion. Stellantis also promised to tackle problems with its North American operations. Net profits for the U.S. European automaker down in the first 6 months of the year. Stellantis reported net profits of $6 billion during the period. That was down from $12 billion for the same period a year ago. Crude oil futures prices gained ground today following government numbers showing stronger than expected economic growth during the most recent quarter. Oil was up 69 cents a barrel, settled at 78.28 a barrel in New York. I'm Jack Spear, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
From New York Times, I'm Michael Barbaro. This is The Daily. Over the past 48 hours, as the nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris went from theoretical to inevitable, she delivered the first glimpse of what her campaign would look like and sound like over the next 100 days. Today, my colleague, Reed Epstein on what exactly we've learned from her debut. It's Thursday, July 25th. Reed, it has been just one day since you were on the show, but that's a lifetime in this presidential campaign. So just to start, catch us up on what's happened to the vice president's candidacy since you and I last spoke.
Go straight on.
It seems like every few hours that the Harris campaign announced she's shattered some other fundraising record.
The cash and the calls are flooding in for Vice President Kamala Harris.
The latest number on Wednesday morning was that she'd raised $126 million since the campaign launched on Sunday.
In just 3 days.
In less than 3 days.
On her first full day of the race, the vice president securing the support of the more than 1,976 delegates she would need to win the Democratic nomination.
You know, we have seen the entire Democratic Party embrace her.
So now that the process is played out, from the grassroots bottom up, we are here today to throw our support behind Vice President Kamala Harris.
The only holdouts in elected office when we last spoke were the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer of New York. They have since endorsed her.
The memification of the Harris campaign went into overdrive Sunday when singer Charlie XCX tweeted, "Kamala is brat."
And we've also seen sort of a viral onslaught.
Mother has arrived.
We need you to be Mamala of the country.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
And she's been part of the culture almost immediately in a way that Barack Obama did in 2008. And it's something that Joe Biden never had.
So at this point, Reed, Harris has the money, the delegates, and the memes, and the question has been, what would be the message?
You know, that's the question we'd all been asking when we first started to get our answers on Tuesday afternoon when she traveled to the Milwaukee suburb of West Allis, Wisconsin for her first rally as the Democratic de facto nominee. West Allis is a swing city in a swing state, and the part of the country where she will have to do well if she is going to defeat Donald Trump in November. This was an event that had already been on books for her before Biden stepped aside when she was running as the vice presidential candidate. Once she became the presidential candidate, they had to move it to a larger venue. Harris comes to the stage, and the crowd is deafening. You could tell even watching on TV how loud it was. Taking the torch from Joe Biden.
So, Milwaukee, I want to start by saying a few words, and I could really speak at length, but a few words about our incredible President Joe Biden.
She says that it's been an honor to work with him and to serve with him.
And it is my great honor to have Joe Biden's endorsement in this race.
Right. As I watched that read, I saw a very new nominee navigating a pretty delicate situation, which is she wants to project gratitude to Biden and respect for him while also starting to turn the page away from him.
Yeah, and it's tricky because she's pivoting to what's next and placing herself at the center of the party as its candidate to run for president.
Before I was elected United States Senator, I was elected Attorney General of the state of California, and I was a courtroom prosecutor before then.
So what she does next is she starts to try to define herself, which she does in opposition to Donald Trump.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers. So hear me when I say,
go straight on.
I know Donald Trump's type.
it's a thing that Joe Biden never could really do because his life didn't set him up to be quite so oppositional to Trump's. Not to mention his age and diminished capacity as a public speaker made him incapable of delivering that kind of message.
And Wisconsin, this campaign is also about two different visions for our nation.
And so what we hear next from her,
where we are focused on the future, the other focused on the past,
is this real contrast between not just herself and Trump, but a policy contrast between Democrats and Republicans.
where every person has affordable health care, affordable child care, and paid family leave. But Donald Trump wants to take our country backward.
And then she delves into the Trump policies, which Democrats have been begging voters to listen to for much of the past year.
He and his extreme Project 2025 agenda will weaken the middle class. Like, we know we gotta take this seriously. Can you believe that
Get ready to turn left.
She talks about Project 2025, which is a 900-page policy document that some of Trump's allies have put together in anticipation of
Turn
him
left.
becoming the president again, and compares that to the vision that Democrats have for the future. And the key part of this,
And we, who believe in reproductive freedom,
is when she talks about abortion.
will stop Donald Trump's extreme abortion bans because we trust women to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
And what she talked about in the speech was about standing on the shoulders of generations of Americans for her leading the fight to freedom. You know, she's talking about abolitionists and suffragists, but she doesn't have to use those words because the people in the Democratic Party that she's talking to know what she means.
We, who believe in the sacred freedom to vote, will make sure every American has the ability to cast their ballot and have it counted.
So she's placing herself in a continuum that dates back centuries for racial justice and justice for women.
Right, but she's talking about it in the context of voting rights, which is a very important issue locally in Wisconsin, where they've had innumerable fights about voting access over the last 15 years.
Wait, how does this speech ultimately end?
She asks the audience and the listeners if they want freedom, compassion, and the rule of law, or chaos, fear, and hate, which she ascribes to Trump.
And here's the beauty of this moment. We each have the power to answer that question. The power is with the people. We each have the power to answer that question. Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. God bless you.
And it ends in this big finish and another raucous ovation for her as she walks off the stage to Beyonce. And when the speech ended, I got a text from a person who is helping to elect Joe Biden and now is helping to elect Kamala Harris, who just expressed their own astonishment at what it was like to watch a campaign speech where they didn't have to worry about the candidate falling down, and about how much their own expectations had been diminished by years of watching Biden. And seeing a candidate who brought just this totally different energy, it gave Democrats a reason to be hopeful and a reason to be proud of their candidate in a way that they hadn't had since the beginning of the Biden campaign.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by Progressive Insurance with Snapshot. Learn more about Snapshot at progressive.com or at 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Snapshot not available in California or from all agents. And by C3 Generative AI. C3 Generative AI enables rapid access to secure, traceable, hallucination-free insights from enterprise systems, all while using any LLM, helping enterprises turn the invisible into the obvious. Learn more at c3.ai. Listeners of The Daily, get to the heart of the stories shaping the world. For more on today's episode, go to nytimes.com/thedaily.
On last week's Wait, Wait, Roy Blunt Jr. launched his career as a one-man K-pop boy band. Gangnam Style. I'm Peter Sagal. This week, we switched genres to Riot Girl Punk with guest Kathleen Hanna. Join us for the show that appeals to audiences of all kinds. That's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR.
Saturday and Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock here on News 88.7. Tell your smart speaker to play Houston Public Media.
If you took part in our recent fundraiser, take an extra step to have your donation matched. Current and retired employees may be eligible for an employee matching program. Visit HoustonPublicMedia.org/match to search for your company.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Volunteer Houston, a program of interfaith ministries providing opportunities for companies to connect with nonprofits while strengthening employee-to-team building and serving the community. More at imgh.org.
Over the past 48 hours, as the nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris went from theoretical to inevitable, she delivered the first glimpse of what her campaign would look like and sound like over the next 100
Go straight
days.
on.
My colleague, Reed Epstein, on what exactly we've learned from her debut. So, Reed, I want to talk about what wasn't in this first Kamala Harris rally as de facto nominee and what that may reveal about the challenges that she faces despite all the enthusiasm, all the money, all the endorsements, all the delegates.
Right. She didn't talk about two of the biggest challenges she's going to face, and frankly, were two of the biggest challenges that Joe Biden faced. The economy, which includes inflation, and immigration at the border.
Well, let's talk about
Get ready to turn right.
She wouldn't want to talk about the economy at all because, there's a lot that happened under Biden in the American economy that is pretty good for the Democrats. Unemployment is really low. There's been a lot of job creation, especially if you take the data back to the moment Biden takes office after the pandemic. But there is, of course, the problem of inflation going up, in part because of Biden's response to the inflation, all that stimulus spending. So you're saying that there's no version of a threaded needle that Harris wants to even attempt when it comes to the economy?
Well, they do have an economic story to tell. The problem is voters don't believe it. Prices are not below where they were 4 years ago at the start of the pandemic. And that, no matter what the Biden administration, Biden campaign have tried to do to explain that to people, they just never bought into it.
Right, so nuance may not be her friend when it comes to talking about the economy, and so she'll just not talk about it as much as she can. Let's turn to immigration and the reason why the vice president didn't talk about it in the speech and how she will eventually talk about it if she decides she needs to. And I suspect at some point she will need to.
Yeah, I mean, eventually she will talk about it. It's certain to come up if she and Donald Trump wind up on a debate stage together. She will be asked about it in interviews, should she submit to them. But I do not anticipate, big applause lines for her on immigration in these stump speeches at her campaign rallies. It's just a fraught issue that is not great for Democrats. It often is, without regard to any of the data on the ground about whether border crossings have slowed or any sort of metric that you want to take that might show an improving situation at the border for Biden is just not something that has sunk in with voters. And she doesn't have very much time left in this campaign to explain that. And so what we have candidate is not addressing it. And, you know, Michael, as energizing as this speech was and as jazzed as Democrats around the country were by it,
turn right.
she still faces a ton of challenges as the presidential candidate. It's not just the message, it's getting the message out.
What do you mean?
Well,
turn
the
right.
Biden campaign was built around an 81-year-old candidate who, to this point, had given campaign rallies once or twice a week.
Turn right.
He was in his Delaware home every weekend, and it was not a very high-energy operation. It's not built for a 59-year-old candidate who wants to get out there as much as she can.
Finally.
And frankly needs to get out there as much as she can to introduce herself to voters around the country. So she needs to repeat that kind of speech multiple times a week from now until November. You know, if you remember when Barack Obama was campaigning for president, he would do 3 states a day sometimes.
Right.
And that's the kind of pace that they need to ramp up to for her